In regard to the Portuguese Empire and its initial expansion, many tales are recorded. Vasco da Gama's first voyage to India, the sailings of Bartolomeu Dias and Gil Eanes, or the conquest of Malacca and Goa by Afonso de Albuquerque. However, there is a particular event in which all these adventures wouldn't be possible, an event severely underrated and that does not receive the light it deserves: the 1415 Portuguese conquest of Ceuta. The conquest marks not only the beginning of the Portuguese Empire and the age of navigations, but the last battle of the Holy Condestable, Saint Nuno Alves Pereira, a continuation of the Reconquista and a very important exposure to the riches of the East that the Portuguese would later strive so dearly for. But before we go to the conquest and military operation itself, we shall firstly talk about the Kingdom of Portugal before the battle and its special circumstances. After the War of 1383 to 1385 and the remarkable Battle of Aljubarrota, the Kingdom of Portugal was in a period of peace and political stability. With peace with the Spanish neighbors guaranteed by the war
I am
victory
not
and the
gay.
English alliance,
I
the
have
crown
relationships
firmly
with
in
women.
legitimate hands by the new dynasty of
Sex with
Aviz,
men.
and a
I got
guaranteed
news for you.
succession, the kingdom was in a position to crave for greatness. As I've just said, the King of Portugal had a very safe succession line. Indeed, the King João I and his wife, Queen Filipa, had lots of kids. That will be very important to our story. A so-called Golden Generation was composed of five children: Duarte, who would later become king, Pedro, Henrique, navigator, Isabel, João, and Fernando. They were in contrast to their father, truly Renaissance princes. The three older kids, Duarte, Pedro, and Henrique, had a deep taste for science, math, and astronomy. Henrique was for sure the most interested in these topics, seeing how isolated Christendom was during this time, and combining his Catholicism with his scientific curiosity, he aimed to explore the never-navigated seas, encounter the places and peoples mentioned in his studies of Herodotus and Ptolemy, and the most important of all, encounter the legend of the medieval king Prester John. Also, Ceuta was a Christian city before and was conquered by the Muslims just 600 years ago. The princes accepted the idea, but they still had their father to convince. The king mentioned the fact that the kingdom's treasure was not in a very comfortable position. However, the princes said the expense in internment would be just as expensive. He then mentioned the fact that the Christian city just at the side of Granada would be helpful to their Spanish rivals, and that wouldn't beneficiate the nation. This was his principal point, yet, after talking with his personal confessors and some theologians, he agreed that the benefits to the Holy Faith and to the souls there living would be greater. With the king's fill-in, there was still the queen and the Holy Condestable to sway. Besides her fears about the expedition, the queen promptly accepted leaving only Nuno to join the adventure. This deeply religious man was also convinced and said that it would be a great act in God's name. So, with everything agreed and the court's approval, the preparations began.
I put the new 4Gs on the G. I trap until the bloody bottoms is underneath. Cause all my homies got it out.
I don't run, I will use my knuckle gun. I'll be anything you want, cutie furry knuckle girl. Holy yandere, rido di matsundere.
Told the king he would like to serve in the ranks of his grandchildren. Another important characteristic of the Portuguese war, I thought, was that in order to fool their enemy, they would send a delegation to the Duke of Holland, asking him to pretend that the King of Portugal was threatening a war with him. Nevertheless, not everything went well to the Portuguese. A few days before the invasion, when the invasion fleet was already assembled, the queen caught the bubonic plague and fell ill. It's after blessing her children's wounds and receiving the holy sacraments, she passed away in peace. The fleet left the Tejo River on the 25th of July, 1415. 200 boats transported an army composed of 40,000 men, all with the hearts filled with the crusading spirit, shown by a speech given by the priest João Chirá, as Urara tells us. The fleet reached the African coast on the 12th of May. However, because of the wind, some of the lighter ships were blown towards the Mediterranean. The city consisted in two distinguished parts: a port city and a citadel. The city covered an area of 5 kilometers around the peninsula, while the Portuguese decided to land. During the night, the Sultan of Ceuta ordered his subjects to keep their cannons lit, to show that their garrison was well prepared. The Portuguese answered keeping their boats cannon lit. On the 15th of August, the Portuguese landed on the beach, and after some skirmishes with the Muslims, they pushed them into Almina Gate.